Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Zach on Sports. I'm your host, Zach Gershman. With me today is the voice of the Vegas Knights, Dan Duva. Dan, welcome to Zach on Sports.
Zach, hello. It's a pleasure to be with you. How are you?
I'm great, and I'm super excited for this interview, and let's get right into it. So, Dan, the Vegas Knights had the most successful expansion season, first-year season, out of any other team, any other sport. It was a magical inaugural season, to say the least, but it did start off with a tragedy. The first game at T-Mobile Arena not only brought tears of joy because professional hockey is in Vegas, but as you said, it also brought tears of sadness as the community was grieving with the terrible tragedy that happened 9 days before the Las Vegas shooting. Talk to us about that first game and what the inaugural season was like for you.
Well, you talk about that first home game, the 10th of October in 2017. So it's less than 2 weeks since the shooting itself, and it was on the same day as the last Golden Knights preseason game. You know, I was on my way home when the shooting occurred, and then the next days were a blur in so many ways, but it was an opportunity for the community to come together. I, having grown up near New York City, thought about how September 11th was this galvanizing event with sports, the Mets and the Yankees playing games shortly after that tragedy, and how it brought New York together and set the tone for America as a whole. But the Yankees and Mets were very well established in 2001. The Vegas Golden Knights had literally not played a game, but it was the first major league sports team to come to Las Vegas, and the community, looking for something to call its own, sought out the Vegas Golden Knights as that community force. So many people here, and over 2 million people live in the Valley, identify with Las Vegas, but outsiders identify Las Vegans with the Strip. But a lot of people live here who have a search for their own identity. And here was something to bond the community together. And credit to the players and the organization for meeting that expectation without even being asked. And how it all happened in such a short period of time, because the Golden Knights were going on the road. It was just a few days after the shooting itself that they had planned a sort of a pep rally, big launch extravaganza for the start of Major League Sports as a send-off for the team going to Dallas and then to Arizona for the first road games. That was all canceled. But the team goes to Dallas and they win in thrilling come-from-behind fashion. Same thing in Arizona, and they're 2-0 coming back home. And when Derek England delivers the speech before the first home game, and he says, "We are Vegas strong," I was observing the people in the arena, also knowing how many thousands, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people might be watching on TV or listening on the radio. And what they might not be able to see, because the cameras are pointed at the ice, they might not grasp the emotion in the crowd. They hear the cheering, and I could see people cheering, but I could also see people bawling their eyes out. And it's not too often you can experience something like that where you're just overwhelmed by emotion and you're cheering because of the strength of the community, but also just the exasperation of the despair. And, it's tears of joy, tears of sadness. And how we handled those moments leading up to the first face-off in T-Mobile Arena was a series of moments I won't soon forget. And one of the prouder moments of my career, having nothing to do with a goal or a home run or a touchdown, but capturing that moment was something that I was and continue to be quite proud of.
Yeah, broadcasters paint a picture. They're able to tell the listener, the viewer, what they see, even though they might not necessarily see it. You're the radio broadcaster, so you're the one who has to paint the picture for them, for the listener. But talk about the inaugural season after the first game going on, the incredible Stanley Cup run. Talk about it a little bit.
I think that we were in disbelief the entire way through. I don't believe, in my mind, I gave the team I really thought that they could win until they won the first game of the Stanley Cup final. And after they won the first game of the Stanley Cup final, they lost 4 games in a row. And that was the first time they had lost 4 games in a row. There were moments over the course of the season when you're thinking, wow, okay, this is something. But can they get to the next level? And can they keep it going? They always did. From the incredible start, we talked about the first 3 wins, and then Marc-Andre Fleury goes down in the 4th game. Yet they continue to win, start 8-1. You're going on the road, but you're down to your 4th string goalie. Can you keep it up? And the answer was yes. Some opposing coaches recognized the possibility of the team accelerating its growth because how do you play without Marc-Andre Fleury? So maybe they got better sooner than they would have had they leaned on Fleury. And there was the dad's trip early December to Dallas and Nashville. All the fathers joined the team on that trip. Those are big-time Western Conference opponents, class of the conference. Nashville had come off the Western Conference championship, and the Golden Knights won those pivotal games. Gerard Gallant, who was the coach, said that was the turning point for him where he realized this was not a fluke. Later in the month of December, best team in the NHL, Tampa Bay Lightning, come to Vegas, and the team was in Vegas for several days before the game. I remember John Cooper, the head coach of the Lightning, coming into the radio booth 2 days before the game. Vegas was playing against another team on that Sunday afternoon, but the Lightning were in attendance to watch the Golden Knights in person, get a feel for T-Mobile Arena, and then was this incredible game. And it was back and forth, and the Knights ended up scoring the winning goal on the power play with 2.3 seconds left. And not only had they won this thrilling game, it was a slugfest. I mean, 2 of the top fast teams in the NHL. And Vegas pulls this one out, and you're thinking, wow, this is not just a team that could make the playoffs. This is a team that could win a division and can really do something. They had some big battles with the Kings going into the new year, and they were so far ahead of the pack, there was almost no doubt that they were going to make the playoffs. I don't think there was a point at any juncture throughout the regular season that they were a playoff team. They didn't have to scramble to get in or slip in under the cusp. That never was the case. They were so far ahead of the pack, they ended up with the largest division lead of any of the 4 division winners, and it was more a matter of, okay, you had this incredible regular season, but what are the chances they move on? Well, they sweep the Kings with all the Drew Doughty comments, the division rivals, and, Vegas isn't going to amount to anything. Vegas sweeps them. Terrific series, despite it being a sweep. Great series in the second round against the San Jose Sharks. That was really back and forth. Knights win it in 6. And then in the Western Conference Final, Winnipeg dominates Game 1, but then the Knights win 4 in a row. And the Jets really were never in it after the first game. So you go to the Stanley Cup Final. And that's why with pretty smooth sailing through the first 3 rounds and then a victory in Game 1 against Washington, by the way, George McPhee's old club. So he's coaching or managing against, the team that he built with the team that he's managing now. And Vegas wins the first game. Terrific game. 4 lead changes. Vegas is ahead 5-4 plus an empty netter in the final seconds. Just thrilling game at T-Mobile Arena. Who would have thought that Vegas would host a Stanley Cup final game in its first season? And it went downhill from there, as I said. Washington wins 4 in a row and lifts the Stanley Cup in Vegas. So I suppose there's something to be said for, packing up and moving on like a regular Vegas show. Had they won it all, they just, nothing more to see here and moved on. But by losing and then losing again in year 2 in the frustrating and controversial fashion they did, I think that the rest of the sports world sort of recognized, all right, Vegas, you know what it feels like now. Maybe you're for real, not just a fairy tale.
No, so as a for real team, when the fan base obviously rallied around the team, what is your job as a broadcaster and what responsibilities do you have to teach this new fan base that hasn't had much exposure to professional hockey? What's your responsibility and how do you teach a fan base like that?
I didn't want to talk down to anybody. I didn't want to come into a market that had never had, NHL hockey. There had been no major league sports in this town. It was not so much in my mind about, teaching the sport. It was more about giving Las Vegas the legitimacy it desired to be a major league city. Like I said, there's over 2 million people who live here. It was among the very largest American markets without any major league sports teams for understandable reasons through the years, the concern about sports gambling and so on. But there was a legitimacy and Vegas was trying to prove itself. And I wanted to make sure that Vegas was not considered a stepchild that nobody would take seriously. And I felt that if I talked down to the Las Vegas fan as if, oh, wow, we just woke up and sports are here. We don't know anything about it. Why don't you teach us? No, they had minor league hockey here in the ECHL with the Las Vegas Wranglers. They had an IHL team here in the Las Vegas Thunder. The Los Angeles Kings had played preseason hockey games here. Oh, and by the way, this isn't 1942. This is 2017 when the Knights arrived. They have the internet. They have national television. If you're a hockey fan in Las Vegas, and so many people are transplants from traditional hockey markets, there are plenty of people here who know the game, who are fans of the game. Plenty of people were not hockey fans. And Max Pacioretty said it best when he came to the Golden Knights prior to season 2. Vegas fell in love with the Golden Knights first, and then they became hockey fans. I agree with that, but I wanted to help the viewer, the listener, the fan learn the game in the same way I did when I was, 5 years old, 10 years old. Nobody sat me down to teach me the game of hockey. I played the game. I watched the game on TV. I went to Devils games. Mike Emrick was the voice of the New Jersey Devils. He's calling the games on TV. He's calling the Stanley Cup final on Fox. And I learned by context clues. Doc says this, Chico Resch says that, John Davidson says this, Sam Rosen says that. I learned by listening to those announcers and coaches and just watching the game like you learn any sport. So I felt that the people in Las Vegas would learn the game in the same way. We weren't going to dumb it down. We wanted to treat the fans here with the respect that they had so long desired and deserved.
You mentioned Doc Emrick, and that goes right into the next question we have right here. You learned from Doc Emrick. Doc Emrick was on ZachOnSports a couple weeks back. You had the opportunity to broadcast a game with him. I believe it was an ECHL game with him for a period or two. Share with us how special it was to broadcast a game with not only your mentor, but a friend of yours.
Yeah, Mike Emrick was the voice of the Devils from my childhood. So it was someone who I had always admired listening to. And, it's not in the same way like Marv Albert was the voice of the Knicks, but also the voice of the NBA. It's pretty neat when the voice of your team, especially New Jersey, is also the voice of the sport. And that was neat. I didn't quite grasp it probably when I was a kid, but admired him so much. And I would bother him after Devils games, go up to him and poke him on the shoulder. And, hey, Doc, I don't know if I asked any good questions or not. But over time, we got to know each other better and better. And he was so helpful in giving me advice on how to get into the business. And I worked for the Devils organization when he was still there. I was in the ECHL with the Trenton Devils. And then the moment you're talking about, it was a few years after that, I was in the American Hockey League with the Syracuse Crunch, at that point the Tampa Bay Lightning affiliate. And most folks wouldn't know that Doc had lived in Hershey, Pennsylvania while he was broadcasting the Devils. He had been broadcasting the Flyers. He had fallen in love with Hershey while he was the Portland Pirates broadcaster. Not Portland Pirates. That was their name later. They were the Maine Mariners in the American Hockey League in the 70s when Doc got the job there. Flyers affiliate, and Doc moved from the Maine Mariners up to the Flyers, had visited Hershey with the Maine Mariners, fell in love with the town, so he lived there. Now he's with the Devils, so he's commuting, essentially, from Hershey, Pennsylvania to East Rutherford, New Jersey for these games. And I didn't know that at the time. Anyway, that's his connection to Hershey. He's in Hershey, Pennsylvania because he knows the folks there, and he is emceeing the Hershey Bears Hall of Fame induction ceremony. Coincidentally, the opponent for the Hershey Bears that night was the Syracuse Crunch. I didn't know he was going to be there, but he tapped me on the shoulder a few minutes before I was going up to the press box. I was about to interview the coach. Coincidentally, my dad had come in from New Jersey and he was going to sit in the booth with me. And I introduced Doc to our equipment managers, both of whom were Bowling Green alumni, as is Mike Emrick. So I let them chat and I said, Doc, I'll see you later, but really not knowing if I'd see him again. So the ceremony takes place. Doc is fantastic. They drop the puck. We're underway. I got my dad in the booth, which is pretty cool. That doesn't happen very often. I'm calling the game. And then I realized that someone has opened the door to my booth, and it's Doc. He walks in, says hi to my dad, shakes his hand, and they chat for a moment. It's a good lesson to young broadcasters to always have an extra headset plugged in. So I had an extra headset plugged in. So when Doc sits down and he puts on the headset, I could say, oh, we have a special guest. And I turned up the microphone. Hi, Doc. And there he was. And I had to keep calling the game. We're on the radio. I can't just ignore what's happening on the ice. And we had some good back and forth. And it was neat because I was when you're a young broadcaster and you're trying to figure out how to do this, a great bit of advice is, Marty Glickman says, consider the listener. And I take that quite literally. And I think of one person on the other end of the radio who might be tuned in. One night it could be my best friend, it could be my mother, or sometimes it's Mike Emrick. so now all of a sudden I'm calling a game and he's sitting next to me. So I figure, well, this is the opportunity to do what I have often thought of, calling a game with Mike Emrick envisioned as the listener. There he is. So I'm calling the game and I'm thinking, well, what would Mike Emrick want to know about what's happening? And he doesn't know most of these players. So I'm dropping in these tidbits and anecdotes. And here comes Aaron Ness for the Hershey Bears, the defenseman from Roseau, Minnesota. And I knew Doc would get that hometown right away. I looked at him and said, Doc, we know some people from Roseau, Minnesota. And he says, the Broughtons, Neil, Aaron. I said, it's the Roseau Rams high school hockey. And just that little connection was neat. And a couple of times when I asked him questions, Doc, there are 9 defensemen in the lineup for Syracuse today. Have you ever seen that before? Nope, I haven't. So we had some good back and forth, but at some point he says, well, I didn't want to come in and interrupt your flow. I just would enjoy listening to you. I said, okay. So we called a goal together. He was talking while puck went in. So he knew it was number 79, but I had to supply Tony D'Angelo. And on and on. So it was great. Doc had an autograph signing in the intermission. So he left, but then came back and just sat in the booth for a while. And it was neat. I'm sitting there doing a hockey game. It's the last game before the Christmas break. We're on the bus back to Syracuse. And, when it's the last game before the break, everybody's going to be heading home as soon as we get back to Syracuse. It's a 4-hour drive. And the bus breaks down somewhere in Wilkes-Barre on Route 81. So that's no good. Guys with early flights, what are they going to do? And we're sitting there, broken down bus side of the road. And I figure this was a good time to thank Doc. And I pull out my phone, I start typing an email to thank him. And I'm sort of painting a picture of the scene on the bus. And I happen to be in the row next to the big speaker they bring into the locker room for pump-up music. So I decided to plug in my iPad to the speaker, and the first song that came out was I'll Be Home for Christmas by Frank Sinatra. So I'm painting this picture in an email to Doc, and the next day I'm having dinner on Frank Sinatra Boulevard in Hoboken, New Jersey with some friends. So that was good. But you fast forward, I mentioned earlier there were 9 defensemen in the lineup that day. One of them was Luke Witkowski, who was playing as a forward. Later that year, Luke is called up. He's with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Tampa's deep into the playoffs, and Doc is in Tampa to broadcast the game. And Luke Witkowski walks into the Lightning dressing room, sees a huge swarm of media over at the stall of Steven Stamkos. And there's one person at Luke Witkowski's stall, Mike Emrick, wanting to talk to him about that hockey game in Hershey from December of that same year. Pretty neat, So that's kind of the long-winded version, I guess, of the story, but it's good. So on many phone calls thereafter, Doc would answer the phone and he'd just start singing, I'll be home. And he's just great. He's such a terrific storyteller. And that particular story, because of all the connections, the prologues, the epilogues, it's got so much to it that it's one of my favorite hockey stories.
Oh, he's one of the best in the game, in the business, and the best college baseball players go play in the Cape Cod League. Same with some of the best college broadcasters as well. They go during the summer to go work on, improve their craft in the sports broadcasting industry. You were able to be a broadcaster in the Cape Cod League for the Chatham A's before you ever stepped foot into college. How did that come about?
Well, like you said, the best college players go to the Cape. I was not going to be one of those. I was an extremely average high school baseball player. But there was
you and me both. You and
Yeah.
me both.
There was no broadcasting of any kind in the Cape League other than maybe the All-Star game on New England Sports Network or something like that. But here was this great opportunity in 2001, 2, 3, the first time I had visited Cape Cod to see the Chatham A's in action. And long story short, my buddy from high school, Guy Benson, had been to Chatham before. It introduced me to the league, and we had broadcast our high school sports in Ridgewood, New Jersey. Football, hockey, basketball, lacrosse. I was playing baseball. It made it hard for me to broadcast much baseball. But as he wanted to go to Northwestern and I wanted to go to Syracuse, the thought was, how would we continue our broadcasting careers together? Here's the Cape Cod Baseball League. Like you said, best college baseball in America. So many guys who are there. It's their last amateur step before they get drafted. Well, we want to be the best college broadcasters. Let's kind of make this happen and call these games. And we approached the Chatham A's about it. They said, sure, this sounds great. And so we graduated from high school, and we were on the air the next day in Chatham. So we're in New Jersey, not in Chatham, right? So they had to arrange host families for us and everything. But, the word had, it was more than a year in planning. So a couple other teams in the league had kind of got wind of our idea and tried to implement their own kind of broadcast. And our vision was to help the other teams get it going, and then we would help our friends from school latch on with other teams in the league. And that's kind of how it started. But here we are 17, 18 years later, and I'm still kind of helping student broadcasters latch on with teams in the league. So it's been one of the most fulfilling aspects of my career and most rewarding of my life.
Why is it so important for you to help these young aspiring sports broadcasters find their spot in the Cape?
Well, it starts from what others have done for me, paying it forward, whether it's Mike Emrick or Ryan Eagle or so many other people, and some names you wouldn't know, but so many people were very good to me. I couldn't thank those people properly. Best thing I can do is pay it forward to the next group. And I learned so much of that from not only broadcasters, but professors, teachers, producers. And I find a great fulfillment in helping people discover for themselves how they think about stuff. I don't like to just give you the answer. That's too easy. This is not about regurgitation or, remembering dates, memorizing, that kind of stuff. No, I want you to grow and instill a growth mindset. And I also enjoy the relationships that develop. It's not just about networking. I hear the word networking and I think of the plug that goes in the back of a computer. It's relationships. So I really enjoy getting to know people such as yourself because I remember being in your shoes. I remember trying to get into a position that would get me on the air, to create an opportunity for myself, to turn those opportunities into gainful employment. And then, wearing so many hats in the minor leagues, wanting to move up, not wanting to exploit anything, but doing the job the right way and trusting that people will recognize that. And that helps your reputation. And for me, it's worked out. So I think I could feel a little bit better about coaching students now because it's worked out for me. If I had floundered before I got a pro job in this, maybe I wouldn't be able to provide the same kind of advice. But I say this to the students, and I don't say it kiddingly. I really do mean this. I learn as much from them as they learn from me. I haven't figured all of this out. Quite the opposite. I'm always looking to learn and improve, think about things in a different way. And each of us are unique, whether you're Mike Emrick and you're in your 70s or I think of the broadcasters that we would have had this summer. These guys are 20 years old. I've not met them in person. Sadly, won't have the opportunity to be on the Cape because of the pandemic. But I still want to get to know them. so even if it's without calling baseball games, Josh and Emmanuel, who are to be our broadcasters this year, we talk about stuff, and it's not all about the art of play-by-play. There's a lot more to life than that. But we get to know what we stand for, what we believe in, how we think. what makes us tick. And that's rewarding to me. It's, we're human beings. We care about other people. And I think it boils down to that.
Of course. And we're going to learn about Dan Duva, the human being, in our segment here on Zach on Sports called Beyond the Mic. We're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive into who you are as a person. And we're going to kind of play off of what you just spoke about, being a student, always not necessarily being the consumer, but always being a student of the game, always being willing to work more. I believe you said that you look at a press box as like a giant classroom. And you also have a binder where you've wrote notes and tips from other broadcasters that you've heard from and listened to. I'm sure that binder is already overflowing, but if you could find
literally
one
right
thing
there on the other side of the computer on my desk. Yeah.
And maybe after I have to check it out, but who is one person or what is one thing that has stood out from that binder that really has stood out with you and changed you as a person?
Oh, it's pretty simple. It's the first thing in there. It's not the first chronologically, but I made sure it was the first thing in there. It's a handwritten note from Mike Emrick. And it has no play-by-play advice. It has no, career advice. It is simply the conduct of a human being who cares about another human being. And I think that's what I've learned most from Mike Emrick. Talk about play-by-play skills and, the craft, the descriptions, the art of play-by-play, painting with words. But I think more than anything, I've learned how to be a good person and how to conduct myself as a professional. And I think that I realized long ago, and sure, my mom made me write thank you notes when I was a little kid too, so it's well ingrained. But that someone like Mike Emrick would take the time to just write a note, and we it's odd to talk about because we do know each other, but we don't see each other all that often now. We saw each other a lot when we both worked for the Devils, but that was a decade ago. We saw each other for the Stanley Cup final, but when you know that you have a good relationship with somebody, and you know that it's a two-way street when somebody takes that kind of time to send you a note. So that's the first thing in there, and it has nothing to do with play-by-play.
Where did the nickname the Sicilian soundbite come from?
Mike McKenna, former goaltender professionally, and did play in the National Hockey League, but mostly in the American Hockey League and in the ECHL too, even here in Las Vegas a little bit. So Mike was the goalie for the Syracuse Crunch in 2017. It was a trade deadline acquisition. So, and I'd known him a little bit, not well. I'd not been with a team that he played for. We were in the Devils organization at the same time, but at different levels. But here he was in Syracuse. Trade acquisition was going to help us go far in the playoffs. And he did, got to the Calder Cup final until we lost. But we got to know each other in that period of time. Mike has since retired and has joined the Vegas Golden Knights as a television studio analyst. But it was in that period in Syracuse, he's ingratiating himself with new teammates, that his personality comes out, and without consulting with me, decided, well, Dan talks a lot. He's Italian, Sicilian soundbite. And in fact, my grandmother was Sicilian, so I'm Italian and a quarter Sicilian. So that is accurate. And yeah, soundbite, that's accurate enough. So Sicilian soundbite, he still calls me soundbite for short. I don't know how many other people call me that on a regular basis besides Mike, but now I see him, pretty regularly with the Golden Knights. That's the story behind Sicilian soundbite.
All right, well, soundbite, we're going to go right now into the rapid fire. The last 3 quick questions here. As I told you before the interview started, I'm going to test your Jersey roots a little bit here.
Uh-oh.
So let's start it off with your favorite Bruce Springsteen song.
Something in the Night from the Darkness on the Edge of Town album, 1978.
You want to give the exact minute you like as well?
Well, riding down Kingsley, figuring I'll get a drink, turn the radio up loud so I don't have to think. I'm not sure. In all this Bruce Springsteen catalog, I have a more meaningful opening to a song. In Kingsley, in Asbury Park, in 2002, I just had a driver's license. Springsteen had put out the new record, The Rising, inspired by September 11th. And I had, my friend's dad had passed away in World Trade Center. Here I was 17, my buddy was 16, and somehow we convinced. Our parents let us go down to what was an abandoned Asbury Park at the time, and literally driving down Kingsley Avenue in Asbury, and figuring I'll get a drink. We were not of legal age, but we sure as hell got into the stone. They were not checking IDs.
And nobody was stopping you.
No. So, so anytime I'm driving, up Cookman or down Kingsley in Asbury Park, I can't help but think about something in the night.
Yes or no question here. Is there a Central New Jersey?
Yes.
Okay.
I can give you my brief explanation.
Yeah, give me a brief one.
It's a small wedge of New Jersey that is right where I used to work in Trenton. That area, it's on the cusp of North Jersey, but it's not. It's not South Jersey. It's not close enough to Philly. It's not the Jersey Shore. It's that, I want to say like Mercer County, that region, Burlington County, that I would consider Central New Jersey. To me, there's North Jersey, which is New York and out. There's South Jersey, Philadelphia and out. There's the Jersey Shore, and then there's that little wedge of Central New Jersey. So to me, there's 4 regions in New Jersey. Not 2, not 3, but 4.
It's an interesting analysis of it. The trend makes,
and I've lived in
the world takes, Bridge.
Yeah, well, that's right. I've lived in 3 of the 4. I'm born and raised in North Jersey. Worked in Trenton, and then I've lived over at the Jersey Shore. So, and then I know that there's that whole Philly thing going on down in South Jersey. So that's my breakdown.
Last question here. What is one word you would use to describe Vegas Strong?
Resilient. Yeah. I for a community that has a reputation, a singular reputation, but keeps bouncing back and redefines itself. I think that the people here realize that there's more than what meets the eye, and they keep rising to the occasion here. It's amazing, and of course it's challenging right now with so much of the local economy attached to the Strip. I feel for all those people, but they bounced back after the housing crisis a decade ago. This area was hit terribly hard. They bounced back after that shooting in 2017, and I'm sure that they will bounce back and demonstrate that resilience after the pandemic.
So sports brings people together. I believe sports saves lives, and hopefully with sports coming back, everything around the United States and around the world could slowly start going back to normal. But Dan, thank you so much for coming on Zach on Sports. I had a great time, and I really hope you did as well.
Thank you, Zach. A pleasure. Always enjoyable to chat, especially when I'm asked about Bruce Springsteen.
Well, in the night, we're out. Everybody else, I'll see you guys next time on Zach on Sports.